Order of the Wicked, Chapter 5. The next day was so different from her first weeks with the Order that Lonadel felt as if she suddenly traveled to an entirely new place. A tiny winged image of Gert woke her at dawn by blowing a miniature horn in her ear. Not that she could tell from her sleeping cave that it was dawn. She only knew it because Gert had told her when she first came to the caverns that was when training started every day. But instead of her solidarity meal in her sleeping cave and a long dreary day of endless one-on-one sessions with Nox, she trained for the first time in the main cave with everyone else. The training caves all had the same high ceilings, bright crystal lamps, and hard, smooth white floors. The walls were lined with dozens of weapons, axes, knives, swords, staffs, and other fighting implements Lonadel didn't even recognize, let alone know how to use. Slings and harness dangled from the ceiling at one end of the cave. When Nox had taught her flips and leaping, whirling kicks, she started out on a harness, and she learned to spin and cartwheel without help. Now Nox and Melindra circled her in the middle of a polished white floor, while Larkin and Holly watched from the sidelines. In the ring there was nothing friendly about Melindra's face. Her expression was stony and focused, her eyes fixed. Lonadel could practically feel the searing force of her gaze as Melindra assessed her every weakness with razor-sharp precision. "How would you fight differently against two people?" Nox asked, as the two of them continued their unnerving predator-like circle. "Think about what I've taught you." "Like teaching her anything is going to help." Larkin's voice was low, but it carried. Lonadel flushed with anger. She opened her mouth to answer him, and Nox and Melindra pounced. Melindra moved so fast, Lonadel didn't even recognize what was happening until she was on her back on the floor, the other girl's knee resting on her chest. "Okay," Nox said in his usual infuriating, even tone. "Let's try that one again, Lonadel." They did. And again, each time Melindra knocked her down before she could even land a strike, while Holly and Larkin snickered. This time Melindra and Nox didn't defend her. They were so focused on fighting that she wondered if they even heard Holly and Larkin's sneers. Why couldn't she be the same way? Or maybe now they expected her to defend herself. Out there in the real world, out fighting Dorothy, there was no one to stop anyone else from trying to hurt her. If she couldn't learn how to deal with Holly and Larkin now, she'd be next to useless when she was faced with a real distraction. But no matter how hard she tried, Lonadel couldn't concentrate. Each time Melindra knocked her feet out from under her, Larkin's laughter rang in her ears until it was the only thing she could hear. "Come on, Lonadel," Nox yelled as Melindra knocked her down for what felt like the 1,000th time. "Focus!" It was no use. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision, but Melindra was relentless. When she was fighting, she was practically a machine. Nothing could stop her. No wonder she was the Order's fiercest warrior. It wasn't just how strong she had something else. Some power that let her tune out everything except the enemy in front of her. It wasn't magic, it was sheer skill. Finally, Nox dismissed her with a scowl. Equal parts relieved and humiliated, she wiped sweat and tears out of her eyes, as Nox called Holly into the ring. As she watched Melindra circle the other girl, Lonadel started to understand how Holly moved. Her inhuman panther-like grace let her flow effortlessly from one movement to the other. Slowed down, she looked like a dancer performing an elaborate, fierce ballet. As Nox and Melindra took turns darting toward Holly, she quickly deflected their kicks and strikes, mimicking Melindra's easy, confident movements. But while Melindra didn't even break a sweat, Holly's face glistened from the effort of blocking her attacks. Even Nox was actually breathing hard. Melindra looked as cool and as calm as if she hadn't been fighting at all. "Good, Holly," Nox said, and Holly flashed Lonadel a triumphant grin. Larkin's turn in the ring was next. As he fought, Holly sidled up to her. "That's how it's done," she said in a low voice. "I don't know why they bothered to recruit you if you can't even block a basic hit. What are you, some kind of charity case?" Lonadel gritted her teeth and refused to talk to Holly. If Melindra could ignore her, so could she. And Larkin might have been just as good as a fighter as Holly, but he had to work even harder. He was breathing hard, and his forehead was slick with sweat. "What was your family, a bunch of peasants? My family was royalty. They taught me how to protect myself, you know," Holly said airily, waving a hand, "in case some dirty quadling wanted to kidnap me for ransom." She sounded as though she found the thought utterly delicious. "That's ridiculous. Quadlings don't kidnap people. And you don't know anything about my family, and you know even less about me." Lonadel snarled in spite of herself. She could take plenty of insults. But not that. Never that. Someone's a little defensive. Why, I bet your parents probably weren't even. Lonadell's body moved before her. Her brain even registered the slight. All those weeks with Knox had paid off. Her instincts worked just fine when they wanted to, and before she knew what she was doing, her fist connected with Holly's sneering face. Holly reeled backward in shock, blood gushing from her nose that looked suddenly distinctively crooked. "What are you doing?" Someone was shouting behind her, but Holly had already recovered and dropped into her fighting stance. Whatever else she was no coward, and like Knox had said, she could really fight. She lunged at Lonadell, her fists up for the offensive, and Lonadell ducked and lashed out, just the way Knox had taught her. All the endless, boring repetitions and drills had sunk the movements into her muscles, until they came as easily as breathing. As she and Holly flowed and jabbed around each other, she found herself smiling. She liked fighting, and more than that, she was good at it. She saw her opening and drew back her fist, preparing to lay Holly out on the mats of the training cave, and then Larkin hit her in the back of the head. She staggered backward and brought her fist up again, but it was too late. Holly swept her feet out from under her with a low kick, and she toppled to the mats so hard she saw stars. "What is this?" Mombi barked. Where had the witch even come from? Did she have eyes in the back of her head? Probably, Lonadell thought, rubbing her ringing temples. Holly had danced away from her, and martyred expressions on her face as she tenderly dabbed at her nose. "What were you thinking?" Behind Mombi, she saw Knox with his arms folded across his chest. Melindra looked like she was trying not to crack a smile. Holly and Larkin had identical expressions of smug satisfaction. "Let her sit up," Melindra urged. Mombi grumbled something under her breath that sounded like idiot girl, but offered Lonadell her hand and pulled her to her feet. Lonadell winced as a white-hot flare of pain laced through her head. Mombi nodded grimly. "Serves you right," she said, but her voice was a little more sympathetic. "A trip to the healing pool will fix you right up, but maybe a headache will serve to remind you that we do not fight each other outside the ring." She whirled around, pointing at Larkin and Holly. "And that goes for the two of you, too. Don't think I don't know who started this one. Try that again, and you'll be the ones getting whacked upside the head. Is that clear?" Holly and Larkin quickly rearranged their faces into expressions of contrite humility. "Yes, Mombi," Holly said sweetly in a high-pitched sing-song. Mombi rolled her eyes. "Now get out of here, the lot of you," she said crossly. Knox looked startled. "Sparring practice has moved to Cavern 2. Lonadell and I will need the main cave. If you think your girl's ready for the magic, it's time she got some real lessons. None of this aggravating people in corridors nonsense." She gave Knox a dirty look. "I thought," he said, flushing, and Mombi wagged a finger at him. "Your job isn't to do any thinking," she interrupted. She turned toward Lonadell, and behind her back, Knox gave her a look that was murderous. Lonadell wondered what was going on here. It didn't just feel like Mombi's reprimanding him for stepping out of the line. It was like there was something a whole lot long complicated history between them. Something she couldn't even begin to guess. "You're dismissed," Mombi added, waving a hand at Holly, Larkin, Melinda, and Knox. Melindra slipping out of the fighting mode as easily as she'd gotten into it. She rolled her eyes and gave Lonadell a sympathetic look, mouthing the words, "Good luck," when the old witch's back was turned. Holly smiled evenly. "You're going to need it," she added with a hiss. Mombi's mouth twitched with an almost smile, and Lonadell knew she'd heard. "Well, what are we waiting for?" Melindra said in a normal tone of voice, prodding Holly and Larkin out of the cave. "Get a move on, you little wobblebugs. I'll put you through your paces next door, and if you try to hit me on the head, I'll make you regret the day you were born." But Knox didn't budge as the others filed out of the cavern. "I should stay," he said stiffly. "You put me in charge of training new recruits, even if you're the one teaching her magic." Another strange electric charge passed between them, and something about Mombi's demeanor softened. "Oh, all right," she grumbled, but her usual hostile fierceness was suddenly gone. Lonadell made a note to ask Melindra later what Knox's history was with the witch. She mentioned Mombi had raised them, but there didn't seem much love lost between the two. Knox sat in a corner, stretching out his long, muscular legs, and leaning back against the wall. He crossed his arms over his chest, his expression back to its usual unreadability. Lana Del would have preferred he not be in the room. If she was going to humiliate herself, she'd rather he didn't see it. But she knew better than to ask him to leave, especially after whatever had just happened between him and Mombi. She straightened her spine. Something about being around Mombi always made her remember her posture, and waited expectantly for the witch to tell her what to do. And waited, and waited. The old witch stared at her silently. A long, awkward moment passed, and then another. Lana Del cleared her throat, and then just like that, Mombi snapped her fingers, and Lana Del jumped. The witch smiled. "You probably think magic is just like that," she said. "Snap your fingers and miracles happen." She snapped again, and Lana Del gasped. A huge, perfect replica of a lion loomed over her, its mouth bared in a snarl. She knew it wasn't real, but she still threw up her arms in self-defense. Mombi snapped a third time, and the lion disappeared. "I don't think that at all," Lana Del said honestly. "Good," Mombi said, "because it looks easy. But the easy part is the illusion. Like everything else worth learning, magic takes hard work. Not everyone can do it. In fact, most people can't. But Nox sees something in you." She looked over to where he sat, looking stonily back at her. "And you wouldn't have made it here in the first place if you didn't have something more than an ordinary courage." Looking for Mombi, there was a compliment. "So how do I—" Lana Del began, but the witch didn't wait for her to finish her sentence. She leaned forward and grabbed Lana Del's hands with both of hers, staring deeply into her eyes. And suddenly Lana Del wasn't in the cavern with Mombi anymore. They were standing on a surface that was as clear and solid as glass. Blooming clouds of color moved through the ground beneath them like ink expanding in water. More clouds swirled around them in the air, expanding and contracting as if they were living, breathing things. In the distance, a sparkling range of mountains shifted and pulsed like the clouds that surrounded them, changing colors with every beat. Pale sunrise, rose pink, deep sapphire blue, a vivid blue-gray like the sky before a thunderstorm. Just past where she and Mombi stood, a river flowed merrily over the glassy ground, sunlight dancing across its surface. The air was warm and balmy as bathwater. The sky overhead was a clear, flawless blue that served as a gorgeous backdrop to the clouds that moved around them. Lana Del gasped. It was the most beautiful place she's ever been. More beautiful than Glamora's dazzling banquet hall. More beautiful than anything she's seen in her long journey to Mount Gilkin. More beautiful even than home. Not that she had a home anymore. Mombi beamed at her, pleased as punch. "Sky Island," she said proudly. "Used to be quite the tourist destination before, well, you know. Now it's one of the last remaining places in Oz that's truly free." She wagged an eyebrow. "Of course, that's because there's no magic here, and no one actually lives here now that the hotel is abandoned and the souvenir store closed. But still, on this single glittery bangle, we're completely safe from Dorothy. For now, as long as she doesn't know that we're here." Mombi looked suddenly haggard. "So not really all that safe after all, but you get my drift." "I'm assuming we're not here on vacation," Lana Del said when she caught her breath again. "No," Mombi said with a wry grin. Though Lorraine knows we all could use one, I'm afraid vacations aren't on the agenda for any of us anytime soon. You're here to learn magic, girl. Or, let me revise that. You're here to tap into the magic you already know." "I can't do that in the training caves?" "Oh, sure you can. But this is much nicer, don't you think? Plus, if you accidentally turn a rock into a dragon or some sort, there is no one for it to eat except you." Lana Del gulped. Surely Mombi was joking, but her face was severe. With the old witch, you never know. "So what do I do?" she asked. Mombi wagged her other eyebrow. "What do you do?" she echoed. "You stand there until you can feel it. The river's lemonade, incidentally, if you get thirsty." "Feel what?" Lana Del asked, exasperated. "Feel magic," Mombi said. "Obviously." She rolled her eyes. Lana Del bit back a sarcastic retort. Training with Nox was hard enough, but at least she knew that she was supposed to be doing. Standing there, no matter how beautiful it was, listening to Mombi spout nonsensical riddles was something else entirely. She felt something when Nox has provoked her to the corridor outside her sleeping cave. Something totally different from anything he'd known before. Something huge and powerful and alive. Apparently that was magic. but she had no idea where it'd come from or how to get it back. And Nox wasn't here to get in a fight with, although Mombi was getting close to aggravating her with the same degree. Maybe that's what she's trying to do, Vonadale thought, except that infuriating was pretty much Mombi's standard operating mode. The witch looked at her expectingly. "I'm not a witch," Vonadale said. Mombi actually laughed out loud, slapping her knee in merriment. "Oh, goodness, no, girl. You don't have to be a witch to use magic. Everyone in Oz knows that." I didn't, Vonadale thought. And then she thought suddenly of Holly and Larkin and their sneering, superior faces. If they could learn magic, so could she. Mombi had told her to stand here until she felt it, whatever it was. And if that was what it took, that's what she was going to do.